how to fail properly. Hey everybody, it's Mitch with Elevated Business, and we have Brett with Execom in the studio today. Some amazing content coming your way about why it's so important that you actually go through the fail process. Let's get into it. Welcome to Elevated Business, where I'm your host, Mitch Hardington. Join me on a captivating journey as we unravel the real stories of entrepreneurs. Mastering the art of business, because success is not just about the destination, but the remarkable journey it takes to get there. Well, everybody, welcome back to episode 2. If you haven't already watched episode 1, I highly recommend you go back and watch that first. Brett, our guest, unleashed some awesome insight into kind of success, the truth around success, and how he's experienced through his multiple startups and now helping startup companies. In this episode, we're going to talk about some hardships. And we kind of alluded to it last time around entrepreneurship generally, almost always, we'll say, comes with some type of roadblock. So maybe you can start with something that's happened to you, one of these roadblocks that you kind of came your way in life and you're just like, what am I doing? Why am I here?
Well, I'll say this, we could fill an entire season with my hardships and roadblocks and failures that I've endured and learned so much from. But I think just a classic one is the expectation or the mistaken belief that things will go according to the business plan that I've started a business with. And I think plans are very important. I think that old saying, failing to plan is planning to fail, really does hold true in a lot of ways. But I also think that there should be a second part to that, which is that even the best plans, the best well-laid plans, don't guarantee anything. They guarantee that you have a plan. But so I'll share a story of my cosmetic brand, Plume, which is something that I would argue with a 3-year business plan took 2 or 3 times longer than anticipated to get to some of those milestones that were supposed to be happening in year 2 and year 3 that didn't happen until like year 6 or 8. So that plus the roadmap of some of the things that we set out and expect are going to happen and that just don't. So sometimes the market conditions change. Sometimes we have competitors come in and do things that we weren't anticipating. And I think, you know, I don't want to go too back to back with the cliches here, but the idea that uncertainty is the only thing that's certain in that startup journey. And again, that's one of those things that I think it's easy for us as entrepreneurs to run into that feeling of a roadblock and or a disappointment or something that feels like a failure. But there's so much that we get out of that experience of having our expectations smashed, and not in a good way, and then having to pick up the pieces and figure it out. And to teach ourselves that, okay, actually I can do a lot more than I thought I could. My plan only required me to be this good. But after all of that shit that just happened, now I have to be this good, and I'm actually doing it. So then the next time these roadblocks and failures inevitably fall into our lap, we feel like we can do them and we don't need to be stressed out or panicked over it. And surprise, we do them.
Like going back to loving what you're doing, you want to persevere through it. You want to get through it because you're so immersed and it brings you that joy and it brings you that feeling of like, hey, I love doing this. So the money and the success doesn't really matter at that point because you're loving what you're doing.
Absolutely. I think it's maybe best categorized as voluntary suffering. And in business, we're going to suffer whether we volunteer to or not. And I think what happened, at least in my entrepreneurial career, is that after some of those early experiences of having my ass handed to me in the context of trying to start and grow a business, and again, going through those learnings, that this is just something that happens. Like, it's not because I particularly suck at what I'm trying to do, or that the market opportunity is not good. It's almost always the case that the timing might be a little bit off, or something changed that we didn't anticipate. I think a good analogy would be if we go off to do something in the outdoors and the weather turns bad. I mean, that can make a trail slippery, or it can make something a lot harder to see in the dark. And again, it's not a reflection on us as having been bad hikers. It's just, this is part of the landscape. So people who are experienced hikers come back with some weather gear and they're prepared for those things, and it happens and they just keep going. And I think that is very true in business as well, where as an entrepreneur, if you've gone through enough of those unpleasant surprises, you're much more likely to be able to greet them, to welcome them, and be like, all right, this is gonna happen, and I know I can do it. I'm gonna just take this challenge and rise up to it. And I know I'm going on a little bit at length on this one, but it's personally a really important one to me. And I think really because this is the biggest thing I'm trying to instill in my kids. And whenever I go in a business direction with lessons that I teach them, it falls flat. They don't give a crap about making money or any of that. But if I can communicate some of those lessons around just voluntarily suffering or taking the hardship and looking at it as a way to learn and a way to get better, there's so much value in that. My 10-year-old son was in a soccer game last weekend. They were up against a really tough team. They were down several goals, and you could tell that these little guys were feeling defeated and just really not, like they'd given up. And so I said to my son, don't look at the score, just pretend this is a practice and just play as though you're practicing. And I don't know that he really took that and integrated it over the remaining 10 minutes of his soccer game, but I think it is something that is happening to us all the time, where we get things that don't come easily and that disappoint us, and that those are so valuable. And if we can just look at it as training, or look at it as this is actually building me up, I know it's not easy to do, but it pays off in all these ways that when we come back to it, it's always there. And money isn't, money comes and goes, flows in and out of business, but the traits of someone who is a strong founder and who has that inner resilience, that stays there.
It's creating the person.
It's creating the person. It's building the founder as much as it's building the business. Yeah. Sometimes the business is falling apart, but the founder is being built.
It's amazing. I've never actually thought of it that way before, so thank you for sharing that insight.
Well, thank you for asking the great questions.
We've talked about failing is kind of inevitable. Failing is going to most likely happen, and it's building you as a character.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's really important then for new entrepreneurs and new startups and new founders to partner with people who have gone through these certain hardships to help them along, help them through, maybe give them those words of encouragement or help them navigate those tricky waters?
That's an awesome question, and also a tricky answer, because the short answer is yes. I think for the sake of, especially if that founder has some investors involved, it's in everybody's interest for an inexperienced founder to have experienced people around them who can help push that thing forward in a way that if things start to flounder, it can be quickly pulled back on track. Now, there's a caveat, which is that I think the best advisors or the best co-founders who are perhaps more experienced than someone who's a first-time founder that they're getting into a venture with, for them to be able to let that person fall down and to take some of the learnings and to get the experience of having to pull themselves up and having to suffer a little bit. Because again, I think without those mini failures and those stumblings that go on, they miss out on such a huge learning and growing opportunity. And I don't know if this is common. I've seen it a few times, but I've seen people who have founded companies and they had great timing and good execution too, and where they had a success. Like first crack at it, first time founder, pretty good win, big enough exit that it's life-changing money. And then like me, as I was coming out of my first attempt at a startup as a university student, it wasn't a big exit, but it was big enough for me at that age that I thought I was like a business god. These folks go and start another business and it doesn't go well. And they couldn't be more surprised. But they also realize in hindsight after that second attempt that didn't go well, that actually the first one was a lot more luck than they realized. So I think That's why we need to fall down, we need to fail, we need to have people around us who, yes, they can keep the thing from going off a cliff, but they also can let us have that experience of learning those lessons and building ourselves up as entrepreneurs as we go.
Yeah, I would 100% have to agree with you on that, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are hiring business coaches to prevent them from failing, or hiring people that are selling them on the thing of, well, I'll help you eliminate all of the roadblocks in the way. And I think along the same lines as you, it's doing them a disservice, because yes, you should surround yourself with those people that are able to help you pick you up, dust you off, give you the right counseling and advice. But at the same time, when I think of my life and all of the hardest things I've ever had to endure, it was me that was the one that put in the work. Yes, I had great people around me who helped reassure me and help, rebuild me back up, but it really came down to me deciding to do it. And if someone's just doing it for you, you're not doing yourself a service. You're an employee at that point.
That's totally true. I think there's a sweet spot in there where the coaches or the advisors or the consultants, if they can do the stuff that's just technical and time consuming, and where if you get it wrong, it has big consequences, that you're probably not going to learn much through the process because you didn't understand the technical nature of it to begin with. I think that's the stuff that's perfect for early stage founders to outsource or hire outside help on, and not have to think about or have the risk of that derailing their business success. The things like leadership or personal development in the sense of being able to suffer and to just deal with the ambiguity and challenge that comes from trying to start and grow a business, I think that's the stuff that if people start getting it in their mind that they can outsource that or get someone who's going to make that easier, that's a fatal error. And it's not necessarily the case that it can't be done, but I think to your point, there's so much more value in not doing that.
To kind of wrap up failing and it actually being beneficial for you, why should somebody actually fail?
I think we already touched on it in this entire conversation. It's the learnings, it's the growth, and it's something that, like I'm referring to these folks who have a big win on their first attempt, they miss that. So I don't know if this is the right analogy or context to bring into this, but have you heard of this paradox around people who win the lottery ending up worse than before they won the lottery?
Yeah, it's like something like 90 or 95%.
It's crazy high, and the outcomes are horrible. I mean, we're talking about like people spiraling into drug addiction, their marriages falling apart, losing their jobs, their homes, all of this. And so I found that very fascinating, and I tried looking into what the drivers of that were, and I think it's similar. I think it's that if we don't earn the resources that are surrounding us, we don't actually know how to manage them. So I think that's another potentially really valuable thing that comes out of failure, or just starting from like a really tough entry point, because we learn how to be really resourceful, and we learn the value of what that money is or what those resources really mean. If it all just comes at once and we got lucky, then A, we're not going to learn from that, and B, we're actually more likely, based on what we see with lottery winners, to end up worse because of that. So maybe being a very successful first-time founder is actually a curse. I don't know. I wouldn't turn it down if I had it as an option early in my career.
Yeah.
But yeah, great question.
Cool. Well, again, my head is already spinning. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so many great things that I can't wait to just chat with you about in our coming up episodes. So if people want to contact you again, how could they do that?
Yeah, so email is Brett, BRETT, at Execom, EXECOM.ca.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you're getting as much value out of this as I am. Again, if you haven't watched episode 1, I 100% recommend you go back and do that, and we will see you on the next one. As we conclude this episode of Elevated Business, I'm Mitch Hardington, reminding you that every challenge is a stepping stone to greatness. Stay tuned for more stories of entrepreneurs who are shaping their destiny. Until next time, elevate your business and dreams.